everyone, welcome to the Design Hat podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Sam Harper. So before me introducing him, I think he will introduce himself better than me. So over to you, Sam.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Abe, for having me on. Yes, my name is Sam Harper. So, I am a UX designer over in Lehi, Utah. I work for a company called Entrada Software. I do UX and career coaching on the side, and I do a regular live stream podcast. Those of you guys who follow me on LinkedIn, very familiar with me. For those of you who aren't, you can follow me there, and then I'm also expanding out into YouTube as well.
That's great. That's great, Sam. So like just for the start, I wanted to everyone to get a grasp of like who you are and why you do what you do. So just introducing yourself, I would say like everyone to you, like he has done a bachelor's in fishery, and a lot of you might be
hmm
interested in knowing like how did he came from fishery to design. So, Sam, over to you. Like, what's the story behind it, and like how did you grow from scratch, like from bachelor's which you were doing in fishery to like UX design?
Right. Sorry, one sec. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I just want to give a little bit of context as to when I was getting into UX design, I saw a lot of people coming in from graphic design. I saw a lot of people coming in from psychology. I saw a lot of people coming in from like all these fields that seemed very related to UX. And here I was with my Bachelor of Science that seemed like it was, on Pluto as far as distance from what a UX designer should have, and I definitely felt very inadequate about that. Um, the I will say the long story short of how I managed to make it work is I kind of like I managed to capitalize on the research skills that I gained in my degree as a studying the sciences. So a lot of the stuff that UX researchers already need to know is statistical models are they need to understand sampling bias. They need to know how to set up a study. That actually turned out to be very valuable for me. That's how I got my first job in UX at an agency. Now, to backtrack a little bit, growing up, I actually grew up in a landlocked state, so I didn't really have access to the ocean at all. But I was always very much like loved like marine life, and like I always loved reading those like whale books. And eventually I became a scuba diver. So that's something that really fascinated me. And I think it really just kind of came from this, not so much saying like, this is what I want to do, but it was more of our society saying, oh, you have to go to college. You have to know how to, you have to go to college, study something, and then like go out in the real world. And I was like, well, crap, I don't know what I want to study. I guess I'll go do this thing. Um, and I will say that what I'm grateful for going through that experience is that it allowed me to go through uh, this to explore this interest of mine, right? To explore it and then take it into UX because so far I've already done two projects that are actually very closely related to what I studied. One of them was related to the X Prize Foundation. So we created two apps that essentially take all this massive, like over a terabyte per day worth of data that's collected by the U.S. Geological Survey and translate that into an app that's beneficial for people, just everyday people. And then the other one was a hackathon that I drove down to San Diego for, where we helped create this. It was like this discrete communication platform for poachers, or for not for poachers, but for the people enforcing these poaching laws over in Africa to be able to more effectively catch poachers. And I still plan on doing this. I want to get more into the eco tech space. So I think it's been kind of an interesting blessing in disguise. It's allowed me to find a niche.
I think that's where like you have kind of mixed the passion of design and the love of fishery towards what you are doing in the projects right now. I think that's really interesting
Yes.
to know, and everyone should get that. It's like they can kind of mix up what they love and what they want to do in the professional life to somehow, I would say, love what they are doing in a way. I think that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yep. Now, yeah, going forward, I will just really wanted to ask you about your startup that is about conscious career shift. Like, any do you want to introduce that to the audience? Yep.
Yeah, so that's a part-time career coaching program that I am doing right now. Still working on getting the landing pages up and everything, but I have worked with a few clients. So far, they've really enjoyed, really gotten a lot out of like working with me. And it really what I do is like I help people get into get into UX smoother. I realize that a lot of people are making a career change. I myself made a massive career change, and I want to show other people how to do it. It's making a career change into UX is not scary. It's hard. It's not hard, but it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of I would say a lot of mental strength, but it's definitely doable.
I agree, because like for me as well, like I got from tech to UX, which is not that distinct, but for me it was like a very big step to take, convincing parents and then all of those things and convincing myself that would I be able to do it. I think these all things are very important, and like you are doing a very interesting and great job, like helping people out and like how they can change the career. Like that's great. Uh, Yep. So going forward, I would just really wanted to like get deep dive into the UX process of yours. Like basically, like a lot of audience are the ones who really want to get into design field and they are just exploring their options. So how would you explain to that kind of audience like what is UX design and how they can like kind of give some examples which kind of resonates with their general life? Like what is UX?
Right. So I've actually got a lot of ways that I like to explain user experience. Whenever I'm explaining it to the 60 and older crowd, usually what I say is I make the internet easier to use. And then that seems to work for them. Um, when I'm explaining it to, um, let's say, like anybody else who they may be our age, they may be younger, maybe a little bit older, but they don't really know what UX is. So what I like to say is, um, look at how our apps or how are like I mean they didn't really have apps back in the early 2000s, but like look at how websites evolved over the years. Look at what eBay was like. Look at what
Mhm.
Amazon was like. If you wanted to purchase something, you had to go through a bunch of different steps. You had to manually enter your credit card information every time, and it would probably take what, maybe like 5-10 minutes to like make a purchase because they had to verify all this stuff and then save it and everything. And now we on Amazon and you've just got your phone, you swipe and you've made a purchase. There's a reason for that. It's because there are people behind the scenes who are studying how human behavior works on these digital platforms and how they can simplify it to increase customer satisfaction, decrease bounce rates, increase revenue for the company, everything. So it really just turns out to be a win-win-win for everybody.
Yep, I think it's very great to know about these things and how UX design really has evolved. Like I think just few years back, like UI UX designers were not even like hired at a great pace, and nowadays like it's very important because I think I'm not sure, like I think might be because of we are getting like very rapidly into digital world, like because of COVID,
Mhm.
because everything was getting digital, like something like that. So yeah, like getting something into the COVID section as well, like the COVID hit, like what kind of changes did you experience in your career? Like how did COVID hit the UX design industry? Like can you explain that?
Oh man, I'm not really sure how I can speak to how it's affected UX as a whole. For me, and this is going to sound really weird and crazy, but COVID was actually one of the best things that could have happened to me, and I'll explain why. Because on in July of last year, I got laid off from my job, and I was working at an agency in downtown Salt Lake. And at first, for the first when anytime you lose your job, it's you go through this process of mourning. It's hard. You're constantly thinking like, how the hell am I going to pay my bills now? But 3 weeks later, I got picked up at the company that I'm at right now, doing in-house work on an in-house SaaS platform. I got a major pay bump. the team that I'm working with now is significantly more robust than it was at the agency. And we're doing I kind of it got me out of the agency space, which I kind of appreciated too, not just bouncing between projects, but instead focusing on like one single platform. So I think for me, it's actually been like a pretty big like upward trajectory for my career. As far as how I've seen it affect the UX industry, at least like from what I've seen, is that it seems like there's I don't know if this is actually true or not, but it seems like there's a lot more people who are making career transitions.
Hmm.
Uh, because I think that COVID in a way has been an opportunity for people to like reset what they like really kind of like step back and say, okay, what do I really want out of life? Right. So, um, and I think that you'll hear, especially because of they'll be, industrial engineer, they'll be, I don't know, just doing something else, and then they get laid off, and then they're kind of like, okay, well, is this really an industry I want to stay in? And they start exploring other things, find UX design, and then decide to start pursuing it. So I think that it's been in a way, I think actually COVID's been kind of a blessing for everybody in a weird way. I mean, obviously there's like terrible, awful things like people dying and stuff too, but the silver lining in that is I think it's been an opportunity for people to evaluate like what they do want. Um, I would say other things that I have seen is I've seen more and more jobs going remote.
Hmm.
So I've seen like companies like Zillow and a lot of other com- uh, companies that were used to try to bring people into their startups with booze on tap, with these really new offices with like beanbag chairs, like startup culture. And now it's almost like these companies are starting to listen more their to their employees and say, oh, you guys actually want to work remote, you really like that, you're more productive, well, maybe we'll just go fully remote, we'll sell our office or we'll lease it out or something. um, and I guess one more thing I'd also say too is that I've noticed that there's been there so um there's this platform that came out that was called Help with COVID. I think that's what it's called, but it's basically like a resource, like a volunteer resource for people who are designers who are ultimately trying to create something that's going to help mitigate the spread of COVID in some kind of way, whether it's designing flyers or doing UX on a certain site or whatnot. So I think that I mean possibly it's creating more avenues for people to volunteer and create experience for themselves.
Yep, I kind of agree with you in these facts, like because for me as well, like it was really great. Like one thing that like I would kind of want to say from my side as well that uh because of jobs being remote, like I did like my first internship as a UI UX designer, like with a
Mhm.
firm who was in USA while I was in India. So that thing I think the grab of opportunity and the amount of opportunity kind of increased for people if they are looking at the right way. So I think that is something for me that was really great for due to COVID. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So going on, I just wanted to ask about just a little bit getting deeper into UX only. Like I think specifically UX interviews. Like how do you think like UX interviews have evolved in this COVID thing? Because the meeting of people was like almost nil. So how did that happen?
Are you talking about job interviews or are you talking
No,
about
the surveys and the kind of things. Yeah.
surveys and okay. So really it's I would say um a lot of the research we've been doing anyway, I think has been remote because in my case, like I work in the property management space. So we are interviewing property managers from all over the country. So it wouldn't make sense to fly over to Iowa or to Florida or to Vancouver or wherever they happen to be and interview this one person. So it already made sense for us to do it remote anyway. So we didn't really change anything. Now, what I, one of the things I would say is like for things like eye tracking, for
Hmm.
example. So we do have an eye tracking lab at work. We haven't really utilized it for since COVID.
Hmm.
So obviously, things like eye tracking is something we can't do. At the same time, I wouldn't call it like critical necessary research. I would say that's more of just like a really nice thing to have. Um, I mean, I guess aside from that, I haven't seen too much of a change overall, at least in how we've done things, because most of our research anyway has been done remote. And even at like previous jobs, most of what we were doing was remote.
Yep, I think I agree because I think it depends on which kind of project you are pursuing. I think that's basically it. And yep, I think for you it was really great because it's always going remote and kind of few things were there, but I think some things are not critical to be done. I think you just have to analyze the research more. I think that's it. Yep. So like getting into your career, I just wanted to ask like very basic question. What do you do at Entantra? I think if I pronounced it right, Entantra as a designer.
Yeah. So what we do at Entrada is we create property management software. So this is for property managers who need to do things like manage their invoices, um, communicate with residents, keep all their information on file, handle any kind of like mitigations, evictions, pretty much anything under the sun that they have to do. I mean, that'll also include other related areas like accounting, the legal side, affordable housing, military, senior citizen living, things like that. So really it's the reason why Entrada came to be was because originally you would have we had this other company called Yardi, right? And so it used to be it was considered to be the big kid on the block for a while, but what they would do is they would essentially acquire uh these different companies that specialized in some specific area. So like they would acquire a company that does invoicing, they would acquire another one that does finances, they would acquire another one that does renewals and things like that. And the problem is um, eventually, when you're acquiring all these different companies and then trying to combine them under one platform, eventually you get 20 different logins.
Hmm.
You have like interfaces that don't even look or behave. It can be incredibly difficult to manage because they're really just separate units that were strung together. So when Entrada came onto the scene, what it did is it basically saw what these property managers needs were, and it created an all-in-one solution. So that way you only need one login. The site behaves the same as it does all across the board, and that was really what helped Entrada get to the top of get to the top of its industry.
That's fascinating to hear, like how
Yeah.
competitive and the competition like got separated and everything like that. That's really great to hear.
And
So
I
yeah,
actually want to add one more thing. So,
okay.
uh, this was kind of an added bonus. So I did mention a while ago that I'm a scuba diver. I love the
Mm-hmm.
ocean. And, when I was interviewing, I would say one of the biggest perks for me was not expecting this at all, but they for okay, so first you interview with the UX director, and then he kind of decides which team your skills would be best on.
Mm-hmm.
So they put me on my they had me interview with my current manager, and so when he was asking me during the interview like, what are you interested in, I mentioned diving, and then he was like, I'm a dive master, right? So he's actually like teaching divers professionally, like how to be scuba divers. So I get to talk to him about like all the dive trips I've done, and the ones I'm currently planning on doing, and things like that. So it was it's a perfect match.
I think it's kind of a bonus point when you're giving an interview, having something that connects with the particular interviewer. Like that's
Oh yeah,
I think that's definitely
100%.
I think even if like that's the main connection that you get from that particular person, and somehow it kind of gives you a little perk, I think. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I just wanted to go on and just wanted to discuss more deep into your particular and tantra experience. Like, how do you kind of collaborate with other people in the company? Like, what kind of collaboration do you like, people from tech or anything else?
Yeah, so we're usually collaborating with project managers, with yeah, figuring out like if we're on track with these certain designs, product managers. Um, I what I would say was is different at a company like Entrada is that we do like a lot of our dev work is actually done offshore, so I can't just like walk over to the dev team and like ask them questions and
Mm-hmm.
everything. So I would say in that regard, communication is extra important because we want to make sure that our the designs we're trying to do are communicated to to people on the other side of the world that we're I can't just like walk over and say, hey, this is how this is supposed to function, this is what I have in mind. So it's really like what I like about that is it's really helped me to be very 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 specific in what I'm trying to get at.
Yep.
I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this guy on YouTube. He's got uh, he's he's got this it's called the specific instructions challenge, and so he has his kids like write instructions on out on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he'll like if it's not explicitly laid out in a way, like he will like intentionally screw it up, like he'll like put the butter on the bread and start like spreading the bread around on the table, and he's like, okay, I spread the butter around. Or so I kind of think of something like that. Like it's like we have to do the explicit challenge and the explicit um explanation instruction
I get it.
challenge.
I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. Kind of like because people are not like in a team, so it's very difficult in few ways. But it's kind of a challenge for you, and like I think depending on that, it's good for you. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like going forward, I just wanted to ask you about a very basic question. I think, like a lot of the audience might want to know about this. Firstly, I want to ask, like, do you think like every UX designer has a different design process? And if yes, or if no, whatever the answer is, like, what's your own design process?
I think as far as design processes, it's kind of a tricky question, right? Because you learn that, when you're a brand new UX designer, you're just curious about the field and you just read a few articles about it, you learn that UX designers have a process that they go through. And, what I've found having worked at two agencies and an in-house software company is that your process really is more of whatever the company has in mind. So, like, especially at my first agency, we had a very specific design process that we would go through. So I can't just say, "Oh, well, I do research at this stage and you guys don't do research at this stage, so I'm going to throw out what you're doing and do this." No, it's like you have to do what do the process that your employer has set up. I would say at Intrada, it is a little bit more freeform. One of the things that I also really like is that we are giving a lot more control as to how we go about doing UX updates and discovering new things. We decide if we're going to do design sprints at this time. So I would say really like whatever, if you're given that freedom, then I would say whatever your design process is now, like it's probably going to change as you learn like certain other things work better than others. There's certain tools you want to utilize. Uh, I wouldn't really like keep it. Don't think of it as like a statue that you carved out of marble. Think of it as uh like putty in your hands that like you could shape it into something, but it's gonna change. It's gonna evolve.
Exactly, exactly. Like for me as
Um,
well, personally, like if you wanna go, if you wanna, you can go. Were you saying something?
Oh, sorry. I was gonna, and I decided not to.
Okay. So basically, I was saying that being a UX designer myself, I feel for me, there's no specific design process. I just know each and every process, like what it is, how it's done, and what kind of tools and everything. But I think it depends on the company. Some people want research first, some people want design first, some people like it's different for everyone. And I think what I just do, I just put the pieces here and there, and just somehow like cater to their needs, cater to the user needs. I think that's for me.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
no, no, no. I was
Um,
just cutting.
what I would really say too is that like it really largely depends on whatever project you're trying to do.
Exactly.
It's like we can't always assume that we're just designing everything from the ground up. In a lot of cases, what we're doing UX on has really been built, or like maybe it's uh you've got a client who comes to you, and and whether you're freelancing or you're working in an agency, and they just say, we just want a audit of our site, or we just want like this little um this little like landing page, or we want some kind of like some little tweak made in our site. So I think it would be impossible to say I have this design process, I'm going to apply it to everything. That's because that's kind of like the way I see it. It's like if you have a screw, and then you're just like trying to hit it in with a hammer. It's like, sure, the hammer is going to work for a nail. It's not going to work as great for getting a screw in. It's not going to really work if you're trying to like, install something that requires a drill. It's really too broad and too general of, yeah, at least in my opinion, to say like I'm going to be strict about whatever my design process is, because it's going to change based on the company you're with. It's going to change based on the needs of the customer, the client, or the project you're working on. There's a lot of other variables that go into play here. So I would say just be open, be flexible as to what the project needs and how you can best deliver that.
Yep, agreed, fully agreed. So yeah, we are just coming towards the end, and there's just last two questions that I want to ask. Firstly, I want to ask about one of your own favorite projects that you have done in your design career, and like why was it your favorite?
Oh my gosh. Are we talking about like any kind of project I've
It
worked on,
it can
or
be any kind of project.
it can be anyone? So I would say that would probably be the hackathon I did for when I drove down to San Diego. So this was a hackathon that was sponsored by the San Diego Zoo. They're very, very, a huge proponent of wildlife conservation. Uh, they're very, very involved in that space. They've brought a lot of endangered species back from the brink of extinction. And what they did is this was last year, they were hosting a hackathon. Actually, no, this was 2019, like end of 2019. And they were, obviously before COVID, they were hosting a hackathon. Everybody was in their room without masks, but that was the life back then, right? And for we had a design challenge for 48 hours. We were given some kind, like a list of something that the San Diego Zoo was trying to get some momentum on in the tech world. And it was also sponsored by the US government, so they actually had a big play in this as well. And so we were given these prompts to pick from. The team that I went with was trying to address this issue that these people who are enforcing these anti-poaching laws over in Africa and Asia, they're called rangers. So they're like military trained people. They're really, really they're like tough as nails. And they have to be, because the poachers they're dealing with, I would say it ranges anywhere from, maybe like some person who's like, they're really just trying to feed their families, and you can't blame them, because if you go kill a rhino and you sell its horn, it's worth more than gold on the market, versus if they're working in a lithium mine and they're making $3 a day in these extremely dangerous situations, and they're just trying to feed their family. Like, of course, like it's totally understandable that they're going to turn to poaching to feed their families. But at the same time, it goes from individuals like that, who the poachers or the rangers usually tend to work with, and try and help them out however they can, so they don't have to turn to poaching, to these basically like cold-hearted mafia kingpin kind of people, like, or there's a lot of organized crime that goes into poaching. There's there are like terrorist organizations, for example, that will actually like they'll get a lot of funding from like elephant ivory and from rhino horns that'll sell. Like I said, it'll sell for more than what gold is worth on the market. So uh, they have essentially the platform we created allows these rangers to be able to communicate with each other effectively, uh, to collaborate when there's been some kind of like dead animal or some kind of like crime scene where a rhino's been killed. But the problem is that these groups are isolated in a lot of ways. So if group A goes in, does their investigation, leaves, group B goes in, does their investigation, leaves, they don't know that they've been overlapping in a lot of these ways. In the best case scenario, they're just going to waste a lot of time because one of them's already done, collected a lot of data that the other one could have used, but they didn't know about it. In more of a worst case scenario, let's say one of those group members is going undercover. They're posing as a poacher. They're trying to get close to the kingpin to get information on him. And then the other group says, hey, we're going to go in and do a raid and we're going to shoot the place up while this person is undercover. Well, that person could get killed. They could get injured. The rangers that we were working with on this project said that they've been arrested by other people on working towards the same cause because they didn't recognize them, and they've also had to go through like extreme measures to conceal their identity from these poachers and make sure they're not being followed in the airport. Like, it's pretty crazy. So we created a platform that allows them to securely communicate with each other, and it was interesting because we had to think of this platform like the way law enforcement thinks of creating their software, like the FBI does. So, like, one of the considerations we had to take into was how can we make sure that, or how can we at least reduce, if not eliminate as much as possible, a mole getting into the system? So, if a poacher somehow gained access into this ranger system and was able to track like where they're all going, then that could really screw things up. So we had to make things really anonymous, even within an already anonymous system.
Mm.
That program, or that project, won first place. It did get some pretty serious consideration to be implemented by the U.S. government. It didn't ultimately, but we got pretty far. I was very proud of that.
Then that's great because this is something that you really love to do, and like indulging like, or kind of inculcating design as well in it. It's like a dream project kind of thing, and
Yeah.
I really got the aspect from that as well. So yeah, we are at the end of this podcast, and the last question I just want to ask you is because of for the audience. So, like, what one piece or two piece of advice do you want to give to the audience, as a budding designer, as someone who is getting into a design field? Like, what kind of the advice would you give to that particular kind of person?
So the first thing I would say is, um, find project, and I'm not talking about like jobs necessarily. I'm talking about like when you're filling out your portfolio, find work that really interests you specifically, because I believe that if you work on something that you're interested in, then if you're interested in music and you create like a guitar tuning app, or like if you care about LGBTQ issues and you're a part of the gay community, then and you create some, I don't know, some kind of like resource to help them, that's going to be, I believe that project is going to turn out a lot better because you care so much about it, versus if you create, because I'll see this a lot with new designers. They don't really know what to create, so then they'll make like an app that helps people file their taxes. But if they don't care about filing your taxes, then why are you working on it, right? So I say find something that, like, really find something that piques your interest, and then have that be, you don't have to have all your projects be like under that specific umbrella, but I think it's going to help them turn out better. Another thing I would say is very, very important and this is something that I don't see, I believe we should see a lot more of from new UX designers in their projects is um, learn about the scientific process. And of course, I'm biased. I'm an ex scientist myself, but learn about the scientific process, about what, whenever they're measuring a control and these different variants, you're for clarification, like if I'm doing research on something, um what I would first do is I would measure whatever I'm looking at in the wild as it is without even touching it, because I want to get a baseline understanding of what those numbers are. And then when I do my variant studies, then I'm going to introduce these different hypotheses, and I'm going to do these changes and then see how that affects those numbers. I believe that that is one of the most underutilized skills in UX, is knowing how to pretty much like how to measure things within your design, because I think all too often people will just say, "Oh, this landing page sucks. I fixed it." And I'm like, "Well, hold on. You didn't measure anything. How do you know it's better? Like, it might look better, it might, yeah, maybe, but did it really help them in the long run?" So I would say not only is that going to help you be a better UX designer, because you're going to be able to say from a quantitative perspective that you helped this issue, but it's also going to make a much stronger case on your resume when you're showcasing these stats and numbers of how you've increased these certain things. And it's also going to help you on your portfolio when you're telling your portfolio case studies. Biggest thing that really catches my eye whenever I see a portfolio project, and I think this is one of the keys to a really good portfolio project, is can you tell in a statistical way how you improved this product?
Yep, I get it. I get it. Because I think these two advice were really, really great because I kind of felt that way because I think a lot of UX design doesn't really measure their design and the other aspect.
Right.
And I think these tips were really, really great for the people who are watching this or just listening this anywhere. Yeah, so Sam, that is kind of the end of this podcast, and thank you so so much for coming in. And anyone who wanna check out his socials, they will be linked down in the description box. Thank you so much, Sam. Any last words you wanna say?
Um, no, that's it. I appreciate you having me on, Abe.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for getting the
Thank
time
you.
out. Until next time, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode.